Welcome to the eCommerce podcast with Matt Edmundson, a show that brings you regular interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.
Let me take just a few seconds here to tell you about my brand new e-commerce course that is perfectly designed for those of you who are looking to build your own online business, right? I know it's going to work well for you guys because we deep dive into the process that I use to build my own e-commerce businesses. We're going to look at the 6 key elements that you need to be aware of for building a successful online store. I'm utterly convinced it'll make a huge difference to your business. I am super proud of it, let me tell you, and it is brand new for 2020. It's called the eCommerce Masterclass. You can check out what other people think about the course. You can find out more information on my site at mattedmundson.com. Well, hello and welcome to the e-commerce podcast with me, your host, Matt Edmundson. This is a show all about how to grow your own online business. Yeah, we deep dive into the topic of e-commerce, and every week I get the amazing privilege of talking to people from literally the whole world of e-commerce, and I get to ask them all kinds of questions about what they know and how it's going to help us develop our own online businesses. Now, historically, we have had one guest per show. So, and we just deep dive, right? We just go into big old interviews with the guests. But because it's Christmas, we wanted to do something a little bit different. And we also wanted to connect with guests that had been on the show before. So we thought, let's do some mashup episodes. So we basically reached out to all of the guests. We invited them back onto the show to talk about Christmas and New Year's and their ideas and tips on how to do e-commerce better. So this is our second mashup episode. If you haven't done so already, make sure you check out the first one, the first mashup episode, which is actually episode number 43 of the show. You can see that at ecommercepodcast.net/43. But that was last week's show. Oh yes, we had some great guests, didn't we, in last week's show? And today is no exception. In today's show, we've got some more guests lined up. We've got Moyse and Padraig Walsh, who are going to be talking us through what to expect for a COVID Christmas and how to be better prepared for our own online businesses, what the pandemic means at Christmas time and how we can adapt and adjust accordingly in our own e-commerce businesses. All fantastic stuff coming up. Oh yes. And of course, all of the notes from today's show will be available as a free download on our website. Just head on over to ecommercepodcast.net/44. Let me say that again and get it right this time. ecommercepodcast.net/44, and you can download those no problem. Now, without further ado, let's get started with our very first guest today, which is Moyse. Now, Ian is the tech sales leader and social influencer. Oh, yes, he is the man. That is true. And he was back on the podcast way back in episode 21 as we talked about the 7 steps to build your personal brand. It was a great show, even if I do say so myself. And so I was super pleased to catch it with Ian. And so here's an excerpt from my conversation with Moyse. So Christmas is approaching. What are some of the things that you think that business owners or e-commerce website owners need to change or need to put in place as we head towards Christmas? What are some of your Christmas tips?
Well, I think they're very different this year in 2020, Matt, than they would have been in other years for obvious reasons. And one of the things that I'm anticipating is if you don't have a strong online presence, depending what your product or service is, it's going to impact you even more. Because think about the high street right now, bricks and mortar. It's been struggling anyway. Typically, and I'll probably get the stats slightly wrong, but typically I always hear in the October to December period, they do, depending on the store, 60, 80% of their year's revenue in that period. And they've just had a lockdown imposed on them, right? So that's number one. They've just had a big chunk of it taken out of it. And the customer has had the opportunity to buy via that route. And that's, I would suggest that's the route where, and this is the time of year often when you'll do online, but people like to go out and the festivities and experience the festivities, take the kids, do the lights, do a bit of a lunch. So the shops get a lot of footfall, and you want to browse, right? It's browsing as opposed to purchasing a specific item that you've already selected is very different in the real world. And I think the challenge is, even coming out of this, if we all believe we will come out of it and December will have any sort of normality, how many people are going to queue up outside a bricks and mortar store waiting for, what is it going to be? Is it going to be 10 minutes or 40 minutes to get in because they can't allow the crowds in? And how many stores are you going to queue at before you decide, I've had enough of this? This isn't this, because normally it's a fun experience. It's a family experience, right? You go out, you go out with your partner, or you do take the kids, and it's the experience piece. The experience has been taken away, regardless if we come out of lockdown. It's gone. Based on the distancing will still be there for sure. So I would suggest you've got to pivot right now. And I've seen this. I've been in discussion with some businesses who are rapidly trying to figure out how to adjust their business in panic mode, because who thought it was going to go on to this when we last spoke?
Well, yeah, you just didn't know, did you? Everyone thought it'd be over by Easter.
Yeah, and then I think people, what they did is put a tactical fix in place and then thought and looked at, how do we mitigate, how do we use furlough, how do we use what there is to get through this period with a vision of we'll come out of it. So a lot of people have not done the transformation they needed to do because it's painful and expensive. I think what they thought is, we'll hedge our bets. We'll hedge our bets that we can get through 3 or 4 months and we don't need to do this. So let's just tactically do it. And now what I've witnessed is people having a different discussion, which is the pain is too great. I wish we'd done it before, but now we have to do it or we won't survive. And it's not easy. Digital transformation is a great buzzword, but it is hard to do. It's hard to pivot a business. But that would be the advice, is focus now on absolutely taking on board. You have to pivot. You have to find a way, and not hedging your bets again, because we don't know if we're going to go into lockdown, and we'll have a third lockdown, and it will go through to January, February. You know, we've heard the government talking around, well, we're hoping we should have some normality by the spring. So people's reaction, hang on a minute, did he say spring? Yeah,
exactly.
So you've got to assume now the worst, I think, and deal with it, and not have, don't use hope as a strategy, because it isn't a good one.
Yeah, hope's never a good business strategy, is it? Never a good business strategy. So what do you think some of the, so building a digital presence, building your digital presence, people, rapidly trying to pivot right now. What do you think are some of the key platforms, maybe key areas that people need to look at in this, what was the buzzword, digital transformation? Where do you think people should go first?
Well, I think the first thing is, don't get oversold on trying to boil the ocean and become the Amazon type platform, because it ain't easy and it ain't cheap. I think identify what is minimal viable product, what is minimal viable that you can pivot to get business and serve customers. Because yes, the customer might argue, you might think they want us, but they want us to be perfection and have that Amazon type store and all that. Well, right now, you're not going to get there.
No.
So how do you pivot in a way that means the minimal work towards where you need to be, but what gets you up and running? Think of restaurants. They have had to pivot and go, we need to do deliveries, move quick. We can still cook, but look at the basics. What can you do in the nature of your service or product that can continue driving revenue? Not the level it was at before. Don't suddenly think, oh my God, we've got to achieve that. What can you achieve? And fight for it would be my advice. And don't get sold into any marketeers suddenly telling you, give us all this money and we'll do all this wondrous stuff, because you haven't got it. Great long-term thing, and have a look at it. But I think there's going to be a lot of people around promising the world of, we can build you a wondrous e-commerce website, but you need to give us all this gazillion dollars. And what can you get away with is it right now? What can you get away with that your customers will put up with to serve them? Because there's lots of high street ones I'm seeing, like the cleaners, etc., figuring out that you can't come in the store, we can't do this. But what we can do is we'll figure a way out where you can drop off and deliver in a safe manner, so we can continue business. What do we need to change that allows our customer to continue to engage with us? And what I've witnessed, I don't know about you, Matt, but I've seen a lot of people during this actually really embracing local businesses.
It's been fantastic. It's one of the great things to come out of this, I think, is people are going, let's buy local.
Yeah. So people want to support you. So if you give them the option to, they're going to put up with stuff, and they're going to. But if you just shut, you're shut.
Yeah. No, it's good advice. And the other thing that I've noticed, and I don't know if you've seen it, is I think in the minds of the customer who is now buying online, who would have gone into town for the lights and the coffee and the cake with the kids and all that sort of stuff. One, like you say, there's a desire to buy local, to support local business, because everyone's fed up with giving their cash to Amazon. The other thing is that I've noticed is there's a lot more grace from people. So you talk about the minimum viable product. Actually, that's okay right now, because people are willing to, in the current circumstance, they're like, it doesn't need to be delivered tomorrow. It's great if it is, but we understand that it might not be. Yeah. We understand that this might not work properly. We understand that that might not work properly. And so there's a grace from the customer to work with you more than I've ever known because of COVID.
Yeah, I think there's a pleasant surprise. I needed a locksmith during the middle of COVID-1, and my first thought was, oh no, I bet we can't get one. I bet, and they were responsive, came out, did a fantastic job, and it was like we were overly happy because we had a negative expectation from the start. We thought we're not going to solve this.
Yeah.
And I think right now, when you get that happening, and yes, they had to wear the mask and keep distanced and a bit different, but they came and they solved it where we expected we're not going to solve this. And we've had a number of those experiences. So I think find a way that your customer can still engage with you, communicate with them how it's going to be different, so they know what to expect. And you're going to find people people still need stuff, right? I couldn't have waited a locksmith for how many months. I couldn't open a door and we'd have to go around the back. So there's still need for products and services. The world hasn't stopped. It's just different.
Yeah, no, it's very good advice. Very good advice. So a big thanks to Ian, and if you would like to connect with him or for free get a copy of the notes from my conversation with Ian, please head on over to eCommerce Podcast /44. Now, before we bring in the next guest, let me take just a minute for this week's show sponsor. Let me give a big shout out to one of our show sponsors, Curious Digital. You know what? I love its flexibility. It's such a great platform. You know how when you start out, you might typically use an online platform because they're cheap, they're easy to use, super accessible. But you know what? They aren't that flexible. And as your business grows, you end up moving to an agency, right? Because that's just what you do. And at some point, you're going to have this nightmare to deal with, and it can be incredibly expensive. And the thing for me that I love about KD is it will grow with you. You can start out on the platform easily, and as your business grows, then KD will adapt with you. Now, I don't know of any other platform that does all of that. So if you're in the market for a new e-commerce platform, make sure you follow the links from mattedmundson.com. Take advantage of the offers that they've got for you, and let me know what you think. Now, my next guest is Padraig Walsh. He is a behavioural psychologist. Can you believe that? And he has the most amazing hair. If you're watching this on video, you will know what I mean. Now, Padraig was on the show in episode number 37, and we looked at how to use behavioural design to improve our own e-commerce websites. So get ready, grab your notebooks, as Padraig is going to share some more amazing insights into people's behavioural psychology at Christmas time. Here's my conversation with Padraig. Talker. How's things going, my friend? Are you well?
Things are all right. We're back into a lockdown of sorts in Dublin. Hasn't really affected me that much in terms of staying able to move about and like for work and that. But yeah, there's no crack. There's no crack at all. No.
There's no fun.
No, it's no fun. No.
All the pubs shut and stuff.
All the pubs are shut. All the restaurants and cafes are shut. Shops are closed. Non-essential retail is closed, which is a big one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so shopping centres are pretty hit, you know. Yeah.
That's just crazy, isn't it? I don't get it.
Yeah.
Some of the decisions have been made. I don't get political, but I just don't get it.
Yeah. It's a bit of a sledgehammer to hammer in a nail kind of scenario. Anyway, c'est la vie.
So I feel like breaking out into song now. But trust me, you don't want that, because that would just be bad on everyone's point of view.
How was it your end?
Yeah, good. Yeah, busy. I'm not, crazy busy. We have, I won't bore you with all the details, but in effect, I have multiple companies that I run, mainly because I just can't help myself. And so we're merging two of the key companies together at the moment, which will hopefully simplify my life a lot, which is, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. And so life is very busy trying to sort of do that well at the moment. And it's a great challenge to have. And I'm super excited by it. And so we're just having a conversation then, actually, what do we call this new merged organization? And we're like, because at the moment we're just calling it the. And so we're like, what do we call this thing? I just don't know. So we're having to think that through a little bit, which is.
What do they do, Matt? What do the two companies do?
So the one company is an e-commerce, or is a web agency that we have. So we do a lot of web design work. And then the other company is more of an e-commerce solution services company. Okay. So we do like fulfillment and all that sort of stuff for other companies, do their customer service and all kinds of weird and wonderful things. And so when we started out, these two things had very clear separate identities. Mm-hmm. But as things have sort of evolved, they've kind of done this a lot. Yeah. But at the same time as doing this, we've created some them and us kind of thinking, which doesn't help me because I kind of sit as piggy in the middle sometimes. Yeah. And so I've managed to get all the stakeholders who are involved in both companies to agree to a deal where we merge it all together, where we pull together much more, and we're much clearer going forward. So it means that our competitive edge, if you like, going forward is much more cohesive. It's much clearer. And so, and also by merging, you reduce costs, don't you? There's all kinds of add-on benefits.
That there as well. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of on the opposite end of it. Since we were talking last, so I have the academy, the Actualize Academy, which is tipping along grand. And then I set myself up. So I'm really interested in behavioral economics and the stuff that we talked about. Yeah. So I set up a company just because I had to anyway with the house and family, and I've been working as a sole trader. So I created changeable behavior solutions. So changeable, which is nice, and I keep that ticking over, and I do a lot of my clinical work. I'll do all my clinical work through that. But what has started to emerge is work that is. So if I give you a few examples, so a lot of companies now are working from home and they're saying we want some supports that we can give to our staff. So I was like, okay, so working from home, habit-based behavioral change, simple, but at least there's a bit of meat to it. It's not a light a few Reiki candles and away you go. So that was grand. Then there's a few others, like there was a kind of a global onboarding banking company called Finergo that were looking at similar stuff to what we were talking about for their sales staff. How do they map on the sales strategies that they would use in large negotiations? How would they map that onto selling? And then, so there's lots of stuff like that. Like Drink Aware is the kind of drinks company, our drinks public health charity in Ireland, and they got in touch to see what kind of behavior supports could be there. So that's changeable. And then I have another psychiatrist that wants to merge our clinical work together, and we've set up another company for that. So each of these are at the seedling stage. And I'm going, I'd love if this was all under one umbrella, but I don't think it's at that point just yet. So there's a lot of admin associated with that at the moment. Yeah. That's taking my time.
Yeah, there is. And sometimes you, I've always found, I don't know if this is the right analogy, Padraig, but I've always found that actually if you plant a lot of seeds, a few of those things will grow. And actually when they grow, like the web agency and the solutions company, well, they've both grown. Plus I have my other e-commerce businesses over here, right? So they've both grown out of it. And you kind of think, well, that's cool. Now it's time to merge them together. I think if I'd have tried to do that from the start, I don't think we'd be where we are.
Yeah. I'm very much there will be some natural attrition along the way. Some things will work, some things won't work. I'm not a fan of putting all my eggs into one basket, and then if that fails, everything is fucked. I think it's a technical term.
I think that's a technical term. Yeah.
But there's
it's like you read my mind.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at. Hopefully in a few years' time, getting to the point where they merge or things consolidate. Anyway, Silla.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. It sounds like you're on the verge of, some good stuff. It's just like you say, whenever you start something new, you've always got that excitement, but you've always got that nightmare of administration. And this is where, for whatever it's worth, get somebody who is good at that involved. We've done that. We have a lady called Michelle who, she's one of the key people, one of the key sort of directors in the new merged company. There's going to be 3 directors. Me and Michelle is one of them. Absolute legend at that kind of stuff. And I learned very early on, actually, I just don't enjoy it. No. And if I don't enjoy it, I'm not going to do it well. And I'm going to kind of bundle my way through it. So good bookkeeper, good accountant, good lawyer, all that sort of stuff is, well, it's necessary. For me, it's super important. I'm so very grateful for those guys, and no, I wouldn't want to do it all. I wouldn't want to. We've just recently done this thing where we've applied. A client came to me because we do these mastermind groups, right, on e-commerce, where you come in, and mastermind groups I think are really interesting, really intrigue me. And you basically charge people to be in this group. You've got to have skin in the game. They come along, and we'll have conversations around e-commerce, and there's accountability, and it works quite well. And one client in Liverpool said, I want to join the mastermind group, but I've not got all the cash that you're charging for it. But I can get funding from Liverpool City Council through European money, where they will pay 2/3. I think it's 2/3. It's quite a bit of the fee, right? So they pay up to 2/3 of it. So it's a significant chunk. And so she said, do you mind if we do it that way? And I'm like, well, okay, this could be an interesting thing. I'll talk to Liverpool City Council because it gives me access to more people in Liverpool to maybe do something with. Oh, awesome. Okay. And so we went through that application process. And the lady at the end of the council, she sent me an email saying, we're in, we're good. And I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. So I sent an email to the client saying, finally, we have got approval to do the funding thing. I'll be in touch soon to talk about it. I'm now going to go and plat some sand because I feel like I can do the impossible and that will be easier than what we've just done.
Oh, man.
Yeah, just the bureaucracy and the administration of it all just sucks the life out of me. It's like...
One of those days yesterday, I was fucking my accountant, setting up payrolls, setting up just, the usual kind of stuff. Just a very draining day. And at the end of it, I had no actual paid work done. Yeah. You know what I mean? Anyway, that all comes in good time. Well, it does come. I'm not, it's not a concern, but it's always nice to have something ticked off at the end of a day, Yeah. So what's on your mind? What have you got? You got a big
other than just to catch up, what we're doing is thanks for being on again, by the way.
No worries.
Much obliged. What I wanted to do with the podcast over Christmas and New Year, rather than just do one show with one guest, I thought I would absolutely complicate the lives of the guys that edit the video and the audio by saying, let's have every guest on in the past, ask them a similar sort of question where they can bring their unique flavor to that question, and you can just edit it together. and so these guys, bless them, they've got to cut everybody in. Do you know what I mean? They've got to create some kind of story out of all this content.
That's what Amy, my fiance, is downstairs doing that right now. That's what she does for a living, so she fucking hates it. You'd be her worst nightmare.
What does she do?
She's a podcast editor, so she works in a podcast in Dublin. So she does that. She was actually talking with me. I have to record a podcast over video this evening, so she was just talking to me about that before I came up here. She was saying, now this is the program you use. Don't fucking talk when he's talking. All of that stuff. You know?
Yeah. And you're like, yes, dear, of course.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Very much so. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what we're doing. And so, it's not a long conversation at all, Padraig, but I've just got a couple of questions that I thought would be good. Answer them off the cuff. We didn't send them to you before. These are just conversations. And then the guys will just edit the video and we'll let you know what's going on, if that's all right.
Sure. Do you want to record now?
Yeah. Is that all right?
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
The spontaneity thing, I think, works quite well. So
cool.
We had one guy. I was interviewing one guy last week. I've not spoken to him for like 6 months. Merrick D'Souza, lovely chap, a genuinely nice guy. You know, he's one of those, just a very pleasant guy. There's nothing about him which is offensive. And we did this one podcast about influence, and we talked about Robert Cialdini's book, you know, The Psychology of Influence, or whatever it's called. Interesting book. Anyway. And he had some thoughts on that, and we're talking about that, where e-commerce was. And so we said, Merrick, come back on the show. And he's like, cool, okay. So he comes back on the show, and he literally turns up like this on the call. And I'm saying, hey, how you doing? And it's kind of like, it's very nonchalant. It's scruffy. He's not had a shave. He's eating a sandwich while we're talking. And I'm sitting there thinking, it's not what you'd call professional. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, I like the guy. There's nothing, if I thought, something a bit odd. So I'm like, Mary, are you all right, bud? He's like, yeah. And so he says, you know, I said, well, this is the purpose of the call. And he's like, cool. And so I asked him the questions. And at the end of it, he said, so when are we recording?
I know.
I was like, okay, this is my bad. I said, Merrick, I have not explained to you, obviously. I thought we were clear that was it. And he went, oh my gosh, I've not shaved. I was eating a sandwich. I'm dressed really scruffy. It was hysterical. So no, this is the actual recording. So yeah, that's really funny. So here's my questions for you. So we're going to do a couple of podcasts around Christmas, a couple of podcasts around the New Year. Okay. So my question for you is, Padraig, let me word this right. How does people's behavioural psychology change around Christmas? So if we're running e-commerce websites, what are some of the changes in people's behavior that we need to know about? Would be a good question.
Ooh, interesting. How does consumer behavior on e-commerce sites change around Christmas? And I suppose one of the interesting things about Christmas is that it's a shared experience. And the other thing that I find interesting about Christmas is that there is an absolute deadline. There is no shifting in Christmas Day. It is.
It's not going to move. Yeah.
Sometimes I wish it would move, you know, but it is firmly fixed at the 25th of December. So there is this element of group behavior that starts to emerge coming towards this very fixed deadline of Christmas. And this influences a whole host of different factors, I guess. You take the psychology of cues, of a queue outside a pub or a nightclub or a cafe or a restaurant, or we start to see exclusivity emerge, where people start to say, well, if there's a queue for something, if there are a lot of people trying to purchase this product, then there must be something good about it. There are books written about the psychology of cues. And we associate Christmas time with those cues, and group behavior can be influenced by this, that we are all trying to come towards this deadline with lots and lots of either presents or things purchased. And the other interesting thing about Christmas, I suppose, and I find, is that there is so much built around tradition. So there is habit, there is ritual associated with Christmas. You talk to me about Christmas Eve, and all I can think of is a caffeine-fueled extravaganza in the most hateful shopping centre on the suburbs of Dublin, rushing around trying to find something that looks big. And it's a horrible experience. But these rituals emerge. So we have group behavior being an influence, that we see other people doing things. The conversations, usually from the end of November onwards, is like, are you ready for Christmas, Matt? And there becomes this inbuilt pressure. If you have and there's lots of nudges around that. If you go into town, you will see the environmental factors of Christmas lights, of Christmas carols, of, hot mulled wine around you. So your senses are being filled. The sound of carols, the sight of the lights, the smell of mulled wine, that all of this primes us to revert back to those rituals that we would have associated with Christmas before. The conversations and interactions that we have with our peers relate again back to, are you ready for Christmas? How is Santa coming? All of these questions start to emerge and influence our behavior. The deadline is also really important because it affects our decisions. Now, if I had more preparation, I'd have more research for you on this. But we know that with deadlines, it nudges our behavior again.
Yeah.
It moves us from pre-contemplation and contemplation. It moves us towards action, and it puts that pressure on us to move away from just thinking about doing something to acting on it, whether it's right or wrong. You heard at the start of the pandemic that governments were saying, it doesn't matter whether what you're doing is right or wrong, as long as it's timely. Make sure you act in time. If it's right or wrong, just do something. And sometimes that's what I feel like around Christmas at shopping centres.
I know how you feel.
It doesn't matter if it's a good present or a bad present, just buy something, for God's sake. And so many of us can be influenced and feel that pressure because there is a defined deadline associated with it, and it influences our behavior. As e-commerce websites and e-commerce developers realize that this has an impact on human behavior. When you go on to Ticketmaster, when you go on to any flight website, you will see a countdown timer starting to come to say, act on this within this amount of time. So we know that the psychology of a deadline, we know the psychology of a countdown influences us from thought and contemplation towards action. And I think that's what Christmas is. It's a huge global event that influences not just our I suppose well-being and tradition and family, but also our consumer behavior as well.
Yeah.
And then so those kinds of things. Then the final thing was the ritual, and those influences on our senses. We know that I told you the story of popcorn in the cinema the last time, the story that where we are in the habit of going to the cinema and eating popcorn, even when we are not hungry, the person who regularly goes to the cinema and associates that sensory experience with eating popcorn will eat more popcorn than somebody who doesn't go to the cinema, even when they're less hungry. Yeah. And that's what starts to emerge, is that all of these sensory experiences prime us towards consumer behavior, and that's what I think happens around Christmas.
So do you think then, just carrying that through, the popcorn analogy, how does that work at Christmas? You understand I know the answer to this because I'm smiling internally. Do I buy more and buy bigger because it feels Christmassy? Do you know what I mean? Because the lights are in town, because the carols are playing in the background, do I feel slightly more generous because now I'm thinking Christmas is about giving, so I'll spend a little bit more, or I'll buy more, or I'll buy bigger?
Well, the data would indicate very, very much so that people spend more around Christmas. That's where businesses are hoping to make most of their sales and profit is around Christmas. And I was saying to you off air that Dublin and Ireland has gone back into level 5 lockdown, where non-essential retail has been essentially closed for the next 5 weeks. And that's
wow. And that's leading up to Christmas.
And that's leading up to Christmas. So what they're hoping is that by the start of December, these non-essential retailers will be able to open to have that Christmas bonanza, safe in the knowledge that we are all going to be influenced by these environmental factors, by the setting of the deadline that feed into this groupthink and this ritual that influence our consumer behavior. Take the research, and it's just one of many different types of research, but the popcorn piece of research that happens. It's just there to demonstrate that when we find ourselves in the same scenario as before, we can be conditioned to engage in particular behaviors that are habitual. That are habitual, that we will say, okay, now I am feeling more relaxed. Now I'm feeling more generous. Now I'm feeling more fucking panicked. I'm going to spend more. And all of these emotional variables prompted by deadlines, prompted by what's going on around us, prompted by the habit and ritual that we have developed over time, start to influence our consumer behavior as well.
That's incredible. So I'm just thinking, like, as you're talking in my head, what does that mean? Should I then do things like, let's design my website so it feels Christmassy? So I'm sort of building on that cinema experience, if you like. When you're on the site, you feel like it's Christmassy. Am I tapping into that? Should I put on their countdown timers, like X amount of days till Christmas, or X amount of shopping days left, or even simple things we found, like just putting on the site the date, when last postage is to various different countries. That really is intriguing, and the impact that has, and it's all sort of tying in with some of the stuff that you're saying, like practically, how do I make this work? And my mind is buzzing right now, Paul, with stuff that we can do.
Think about the emotional state that you want your consumer to feel when they go onto your website. Okay, yeah. So if you're saying, actually, on a slight tangent, I come from a small town in the middle of Ireland called Mullingar, and as we were younger, my favourite shop in Mullingar was a bike shop down a little alleyway, and for 364 days of the year they had a countdown, just a post-it note with a picture of Santa saying how many days to Christmas left. So you would go there in January and it would say 352 days until Christmas.
Oh wow.
And it would count it down, right?
Wow.
Not sure if it worked for them, it's closed down since, but anyway, what you have is,
maybe you remember it.
I certainly do. And it took a lot of commitment from them to do that every day.
Yeah.
But think about what you're trying to promote on your website. Is that countdown to make sure you get your orders in or you will miss out? Is that the kind of emotion that you want to promote in your consumer? Is it anxiety? Is it pressure? Is it that feeling? Is that what you want your consumer to feel when they go onto your website? Or is it something like 14 days until you see the smile on your loved one's face?
Yeah.
14 days until they experience the joy of having your product. Yeah. And that you're saying, okay, now this isn't something that is driven by what we call negative reinforcement, that I need to do this thing in order to avoid the aversive of missing out. Or do we want to promote positive reinforcement, where we say, I need to act on this because I want to get this really nice response from my loved ones, from my family, from my kids, for myself, whatever that is. So the message that we put onto our website creates the emotional state, and it has to match up with the emotional state we want to see from a consumer. And is your consumer more engaged with your website when they are feeling good about themselves, when they are feeling like, yes, there's a sense of hope, yes, there's a sense of positivity, yes, actually I can see the influence that this product is going to have come Christmas Day when that deadline is there. So the deadline and the nudge still remains, but it's not a case of don't miss out. If you miss out, they're going to be really disappointed, but actually saying, look at the joy that this will bring. So that's the conundrum that presents with an e-commerce site, and it relates back to the emotional state that you want to present for your consumer. How do they want to feel when they act on this? Yes, have your nudges there. Maybe what you're like, you'll see on sites, this is a very popular product with lots of other people, or this is how people are saying, this is what the feedback they are giving to us about this product. And rather than keeping it at the bottom of the page, we incorporate that into the front page of our site. These are popular because, or this is the feedback that we're getting from our consumers because. That feeds into that groupthink that we see outside a shop on Christmas Day, but it's moving that onto an e-commerce platform. That the deadline of Christmas is there. That you take those three different elements and say, okay, there's a queue outside a shop. There's a queue outside Brown Thomas on Grafton Street. People are going to say, well, geez, maybe I'll try and go in there. There must be something going on. How do you map that onto your e-commerce site to say, well, this is in demand. You see only X number of products left, or, those are incorporated there, but not having it this sensory overwhelming site that is putting pressure on your consumer to act now, that it's not a hard sell. Like what I was going back to, do you remember in our first conversation, I talked about the date analogy, where you're saying, if you're talking about yourself all the time on a date and not trying to inquire as to what the person across the table from you wants, they're not going to ask you for a second date. So similarly for an e-commerce website, try to understand your consumer, get some information from them as they come onto your site and visit your store, so that you can point them in the right direction and say, given who are you looking to buy for? Is it a loved one? Is it a child? Is it a colleague? And then here are the things that are popular right now for people who are purchasing for a colleague. So that would be my thinking on it, Matt, where you're mapping what's there onto an e-commerce platform.
No, that's brilliant. Thanks, Pori. I love that. What's the emotion that you're wanting to create in your customers, and then figure out the best way to do that with those three things. No, that's fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. I like it. I was reading some research. Oh, geez, yesterday, the day, I don't know, it all blurs into one, doesn't it? I was reading some research around the beauty industry and how people, when they buy skincare products, they like companies that make them feel good about themselves without making them feel negative. Do you know what I mean? And it's that
feeling
kind of
inadequate.
Without feeling inadequate. But the research, what they came back with and saying was, people like these companies. They do like these companies, and they like to deal with them. But for them to understand that, you've got to make them feel inadequate in the first place. And so the beauty industry has done this very good job at making people feel inadequate, despite the imagery, for example, that they would use. Do you know what I mean? You Photoshop an image of a beautiful person. It's like, oh, I don't look like that, therefore I feel inadequate, therefore I need the product kind of thing. How do you I guess I don't know if there's a question in this other than, how do you do that positive reinforcement without and not the negative side of things? Because I think with our beauty business, we're very much on the positive side, and we avoid at all times to try and stay away from the making someone feel inadequate type thing. I don't know if I'm making sense or if I'm just blurting stuff out.
Let's pare it back a little bit. So somebody is looking to purchase a beauty product. Okay, what is the goal of that? So you think about any behavior that any of us engage in. There is some reason that we're doing it. There is some consequence that we would like to achieve from that. Sometimes we know it. Other times we don't. Okay. However, what we have then is a scenario where you are helping the person to identify the why. Okay, so is the why that I would purchase something in order to look like this Photoshop model? That is not a good why. And we know the reasons for that because the psychological impacts that has, health impacts, the fact that it's unattainable, etc., mental health difficulties that emerge from this body dysmorphia. So then we start to say, okay, there is another reason why you might want to engage with this product or this service, but it's based around well-being. It's based around you feeling good about yourself, that it's more based around accepting who you are and saying, you're going to be a little bit better of who I am, rather than trying to achieve some other alternative goal. So maybe what you're talking about, or what I'm hearing, is that there is this changing of the why. That it's not trying to say the reason you buy this product is because you need to look more like this unattainable photoshopped Barbie doll that is in front of you. But actually what it is saying that you can be a better version of yourself with this product. You can feel better on your day-to-day. There is benefit to using this, which would have to be shown and demonstrated scientifically, but you would need to be able to demonstrate that this product is actually it's achievable. When we think about any goals, when we think about any whys, we talk about SMART goals. We say it's specific, measurable, achievable, achievable, realistic, and timed. So we're looking at the A and the R, that achievable and that realistic goal. Is this going to make me feel better? So why would I engage with this product, or why would I engage with this service? Well, there is demonstrable evidence here that it is going to make you feel ever so slightly better. It's going to improve your quality of life. And the why is not to say you are going to look like this person on a poster. So maybe that's what it is that's changing.
Yeah, that's very good. Very, very good. Love it. Well, a big thanks to my special guests in today's show, to Ian Moyse and Padraig Walsh. You guys are amazing. Fantastic to absolutely catch up with you. Always fun. And you know what? My aim, whenever I speak to a guest, is to find some real practical nuggets that I can use on my own e-commerce websites. And I would say, gentlemen, mission accomplished. Oh, yes. So I hope you got some great stuff out of it too. If you did, then I would appreciate it if you could rate the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast, and even share it out, so that by doing so we can connect with more folks around the world, which is always good fun to do. As I said at the start of the show, all of the notes, links and transcripts to today's show are online, and you can get them for free at ecommercepodcast.net/44. That's all from me. Just to say a big thanks for listening, and make sure you come back next week as we are going to carry on our mashup series. We've got some amazing guests coming up. I genuinely know what is coming up, and it's going to be good. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure you stay subscribed. That's all from me. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again very soon.
You've been listening to the eCommerce Podcast with Matt Edmundson. Join us next time for more interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.